to the second call of Summer Love and Life Support. It's so lovely to see you and have you here. And we have just been sharing in the chat any tiny shifts or small changes that we have noticed since starting this journey. For those of you on the recording, watching on recording, there are some shifts around self-awareness and feeling less alone, feeling more connected, feeling more self-aware, feeling more mindful. So if you're watching on recording, have a think about anything that might have shifted for you. So, and welcome, I think, Rachel. Yeah, welcome, Rachel. You've just joined. So today's theme and this week's theme and this sort of week and a half's theme is around authentic relationships, being true to ourselves in all our relationships, romantic, friendships, colleagues, and primarily with our relationship with ourselves. And what we're going to do this evening, I'm just going to recap a little bit on the foundations that we talked about, self-care, etc. Look at authenticity with ourselves, so how we can be true to ourselves, honest with ourselves, real with ourselves, why we might not show up authentically with ourselves and with others. So what stops us from being authentic in our relationships? You might want to just mull that over as I'm speaking. What stops us? I will ask the question again. And then what might we need? What support might we need? How can we show up authentically? And I'm talking across the spectrum, in life, in work, in relationships. And so I will introduce a few of those themes. I'll invite you to comment in the chat. If you're watching on the recording, please take the time to think and reflect and write down your answers. And then I'll have a time, more time than last time. I'll set aside some time where I'll put you in Zoom rooms and you can have a chat with each other around some of these topics. So to recap, the self-care, self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion, and healthy boundaries, they are our foundations and they underpin everything we're doing this month and everything that we do in our lives. So basic. And I think, as we've all discovered, myself included, it's hard to implement some self-care, or it's different for everyone. Some people find this a lot easier. Personally, I find it a lot harder. I can give up on myself quite easily. I appreciate that I didn't have good role models of self-care and self-love. I understand that I didn't receive consistent love, care, affirmation, validation. And the consistent is important because, as you've discovered, we can start things, but sometimes we don't complete them, or we are off and then we are on. And it's very hard to give ourselves consistent love. But I want you to think about it like parenting. I want you to think about that you are trying. No parents are perfect. You are trying consistently to love and care for yourself. You are trying consistently to parent yourself. And a question that you can always ask is, what would a good parent do? And, we know the answers. A good parent would make sure the child exercises, gets fresh air, has good connections, has plenty of play, eats good food, does their homework, so keeps their responsibilities, as well as that balance of play. So we all know what a good parent would do. The challenge is to implement that in our own lives. But I'd love you to hold that question in mind in terms of consistent self-parenting, consistent self-care. So, and welcome to those who've just joined. I'm going to start talking about authentic relationships, but first I'd like to invite you to join me in a moment of peace and stillness and quiet and connection to ourselves. So let me just check that everyone's muted. So if you're in a position where you can relax and close your eyes, I'd like you to do that and take a few moments to shuffle around, get comfortable, relax your shoulders, and tune into your breath. Tune into your life force. So just thinking about our breath, it is the source of life, but also the source of peace. If you can really tune into it and hear it. And allow yourself on the out breath to relax. Just think about what happens when we are not relaxed. I mean, I think about myself, when my shoulders are high, when my face is taut, when my body is tight. It's all about not feeling safe. It's all about being armored up, primed for battle, trying to protect myself from something, from hurt, from pain. So in this moment, we want to send that signal to ourselves. You are safe. You are safe. And I'd like us to try and connect via the breath in this place of safety. And, I note that perhaps it takes more than this to feel safe. But we're trying to get to that place where we can relax and feel safe. I want to connect to the wise woman inside. So through this support month, I am supporting you and you are supporting each other. But the intention of my support, and I'm sure each other's support, is to encourage you to find the wise woman inside and to trust her. And there might be reasons why it's hard to connect to her, why you don't think she's there, why you don't trust her. But I guarantee that she is there and she has your answers. And she has a desire for you to be bold, courageous, real, authentic, honest, and for you to feel safe when you do so. So holding that image of the wise woman inside, or holding on to that connection, I'd like you to bring your focus back to your breath. And take a few deep breaths. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So if anyone just wants to share anything in the chat that came up for them in that moment, please do. This is just kind of for your own connection and reflection. I'll just give it a minute and then I'm going to move on. So someone identifies a lack of trust in self. And I think it's important to be aware of that, to be aware that it's there. I think I definitely relate to not trusting myself. A lot better. It's a lot better than it was. I used to think everyone else had the answers for me. And I ran around town trying to find someone to give me the answer. And support is really important, but ultimately the answers come from inside. Yeah, someone else says they always look to others, and we like the idea of being bold and brave. Okay. And someone says they're wise because they choose to do work like this on themselves. Exactly, absolutely. Not only wise, but courageous. This is the road less traveled. So wise and courageous. So feel free to keep sharing, and I'm going to carry on. So the first thing I'd like us to consider is authenticity in the relationship we have with ourselves. And this is quite subtle, and I'm not going to spend too long on it, but I want to pose the question. I mentioned in I think the video that I did the other day about a blog that I wrote years ago that I came across on integrity. And I really like that word, integrity. And to me, it gives me a sense of wholeness, that I am in alignment. And the blog that I wrote many years ago at the time, I know exactly what was happening. I was in a relationship dating a guy who I knew I needed to get out of that relationship. And I was procrastinating and being dishonest with myself, initially with myself and also with him. And I wrote this, I heard someone speak on integrity and it prompted me to write a blog. And so I'd love to know if that means anything to you. Like, am I in integrity? And, I think about my relationships. I think about, we're going to come on to our relationships with others in a moment, but it's about showing up. It's about being really honest with ourselves. So I think about, for example, when I was overeating, eating on my feelings, binge eating, drinking, that was kind of out of alignment with my true self. And I was in denial. I was harming myself and I wasn't owning up to it. So I just wonder if what you understand, if anything, by this idea of being authentic in our relationship with ourselves, being true to ourselves and we'll talk about others in a moment, but being true to ourselves in our relationship with ourselves, um, being honest with ourselves. And are there any areas, and you might not want to share them, but you're very welcome to share them in this safe space. Are there any areas where you are not being honest with yourself, where you are out of integrity? And I would say, are there any areas in which you are in denial? But then if you're in denial, you wouldn't you wouldn't say what they are, but you might know. You might know. I mean, it's very subtle. And if I think about, I've been far too busy the last few weeks socially, and it's always about what's going on beneath and what's going on inside. And it's only when I pause and slow down that I realize that this activity on the outside is a coping mechanism, is a way of using to hide what's going on the inside, which are some, some concerns and some feelings and some pain and some worries. So if I think about me running around being busy, trying to have fun, that's kind of out of integrity with how I actually feel, which is I just need to sort of sit down and feel my feelings. So I'll just leave that there for a moment. And if anyone can relate to that, or has anything to share on this idea of integrity and being authentic in our relationships with ourselves, I'd love you to share it. And if you're on the recording, have a think about this, journal on it, and then you can share it in the Telegram group if you are there. Just give a moment, and then I can move on to our next topic. It may be that this is a tricky thing to decipher. I guess it's, what am I denying? What am I hiding from myself? Okay, yeah, feeling out of alignment with career, and that's something that I can relate to, and I'd love to touch on again a bit later in this call, because that is common, especially with women that I work with. Yeah. So someone knows that when they're in alignment. Hard to know the difference between the discomfort of being out of integrity versus persevering through challenges. That's a very good question. That's where it comes. Some of these really tough questions, like the one, is it my fear? Is it my intuition? They require a lot of self-examination, self-inquiry to get to our truth, as well as an awareness of our fears. So I won't read everything out. You can all read, experience conflict when do things that don't align with values. I'm not abandoning myself. So, yeah, I think obviously this is something that many of you relate to, and I want the cogs to turn. I want you to think about it this week, and share about it in the group, about this idea of integrity. And, we're not living in a perfect world, and we are not perfect people, and we are human. And And it takes time. You know, we might realize that we're out of integrity in some way, but we don't have to change it immediately. Um, I can't remember how long it took me to end that dating relationship with that guy after writing the blog. I mean, it didn't take months, but it might have taken weeks. So it's about bringing that to the surface and noticing, okay, this doesn't feel right. This feels a bit icky. I'm not in integrity. I'm not in alignment. And then realizing that it might take us a bit of time, and especially things like careers. You know, we can't just go, oh, I'm not in alignment with my career, I'm going to quit. You know, that's not accessible to many of us. But bringing it to the surface and acknowledging that there is a desire to be in more alignment. Yeah, just allow that to percolate this week, and think about that. So I want us to think now about showing up authentically in our relationships and our lives and our careers. So showing up authentically in all our relationships. So the first question is, what stops us? What stops you from showing up authentically in your relationships? So you might want to think of a specific situation. You might want to think of a guy you're dating or a woman you're dating, or you might want to think about a family relationship with a brother or sister, or you might want to think about whether your boss or your colleague, or your career as a whole. But the question is, what stops you from showing up authentically in your relationships? What stops you from being true to yourself, speaking your truth, being real? So pop that in the chat, and you will see that you are not alone with your reactions to this. So there's